In the last video, you created the add note function, which works well. It starts by creating some static variables, then we fetch any existing notes, we check for duplicates. If there are none, we push it onto the list, then we save the data back into the file system. And this is great. The only problem is that we're going to be doing a lot of these steps over and over again for every method down below. For example, get all. The idea is to fetch all of the notes, send them back to app.js so it can print them to the screen for the user. The first thing we're going to do inside of here is have the same exact code. We're going to have our try catch block to fetch the existing notes. Now this is a problem because we're going to be repeating code throughout the application. It's going to be best to break out the fetching of notes and the saving of notes down below into separate functions that we can call in multiple locations. Up above, I'd like to get started by creating two new functions. The first one is going to be called fetch notes. It's going to be an arrow function, and it's not going to take any arguments since it's going to be fetching notes from the file system. We'll fill that out in just a second. The second function we're going to create is called save notes. Now, save notes is going to need to take an argument. It's going to need to take that notes array you want to save to the file system. We're going to set it equal to an arrow function. Then we're going to go ahead and provide our argument, which I will name notes. Excellent. Now that we have these two functions, we can go ahead and start moving some of the functionality from add note up into the individual functions. First up, let's do fetch notes. Fetch notes is going to need this try catch block. I'm actually going to cut it out of add note and paste it up above. Now this alone is not enough because currently we don't return anything from the function. And what we want to do is return the notes. That means instead of saving the result from json.parse onto the notes variable, which we haven't defined, we're going to go ahead and simply return it to the calling function. So if I call fetch notes down below, I will get the notes array because of this line. Now, if there are no notes, maybe there's no file at all, or there's a file but the data isn't JSON, we can go ahead and return an empty array. And we're going to do that inside of catch. Because remember, catch runs if anything inside of try fails. Now this lets us simplify add note even further. We can remove the empty space, and we can take the array that we set on the notes variable and remove it, and instead call fetch notes. With this in place, we now have the exact same functionality we had before, but we have a reusable function, fetch notes, which we can use down below to handle the other commands that our app is going to support. And this is awesome. Instead of copying code and having it in multiple places in your file, we've broken it into one place. If we ever want to change how this functionality works, whether we want to change the file name or some of the logic, like the try catch block, we can change it once instead of having to change it in every function down below. Now the same thing is going to go for save notes. Save notes is going to take the notes variable and it's going to save it using fs.writeFileSync. I'm going to cut out the line down below in add note that does this and paste it up above. Now save notes doesn't need to return anything. In this case, we're going to copy the line in there and then call save notes down below. This might seem like overkill. We've essentially taken one line and replaced it with a different line, but it is a good idea to start getting in the habit of creating reusable functions. Now calling save notes with no data is not going to work. We want to pass in the notes variable, which is our notes array defined up above. With this in place, the add note function should now work as it did before we did any of our refactoring. I'm going to remove that line there, putting all the variable declarations next to each other. Next step in the process is going to be to test this out by creating a new note. We already have two notes with a title of secret and a title of secret2. Let's go ahead and make a third one using node app.js. We're going to use the add command and we're going to pass in a title of to buy and a body of food. Awesome. This should create a new note. And if I run the command, you can see we don't have any obvious errors. And over inside of our file, if I scroll to the right, we have our brand new note with a title of to buy and a body of food. So everything is working as expected, even though we've refactored the code. Now, the next thing I want to do inside of add note is take a moment to return the note that's getting added. And that's going to happen right after save notes comes back. We're going to return note. This note is going to get returned to whoever called the function. And in that case, it's going to get returned to app.js, where we call it right here. We can make a variable to store this result. and we can call it note. Now your challenge for this video is going to be to print a message. If note exists, then we know the note was created. That means we can go ahead and print a message like note created, and we can print out the note title and the note body. Now, if note does not exist, if it's undefined, that means there was a duplicate and that note title already exists. If that's the case, I want you to print an error message like note title already in use. There's a ton of different ways you could do this. You can use an if statement to check what the note variable equals. You could use a library like Lodash to do your type checking for you. Whatever way you happen to get it done works. The goal, though, is to print two different messages depending on whether or not a note was returned. Now, inside of add note, if this if statement never runs, we don't have an explicit call to return. But as you know in JavaScript, if you don't call return, undefined automatically gets returned. That means if duplicate notes.length is not equal to 0, undefined is going to get returned, and we can use that as the condition for our statement. So take a moment to knock this out. Feel free to use Stack Overflow, Google around, do whatever you need to do to get it done. The goal, though, is to have a message print if things went well, or if things went bad, you still want to print that message. Once you're done, go ahead and test it out in the terminal by creating a new note without a duplicate title and a note with a duplicate title. When you're done, you can go ahead and click play. How'd you do? Hopefully you were able to knock that out without too much trouble. The first thing I'm going to do is create an if statement, if note. This is going to be an object if things went well. It's going to be undefined if things went poorly. This code in here is only ever going to run if it's an object. Undefined is going to fail the condition inside of JavaScript. Now, if the note did get created successfully, what we're going to do is print a little message to the screen. Console.log, note created. If things went poorly, inside of the else clause, we can call console.log, and we can print something like note title taken. Awesome. Now, the other thing we want to do, if things went well, is print out the note's content. I'm going to do this by first using console.log to print a couple of hyphens. This is going to create a little space above my note. Then I can use console.log twice. The first time, we're going to print the title. I'm going to add title as a string to show you what exactly you're seeing. Then I can concatenate the title, which we have access to in note.title. Now this uses an ES5 syntax. We can swap this out with an ES6 syntax using what we already talked about, template strings. Title, colon space, then we can use our $ with our curly braces to inject the note title variable. I'm going to copy this line and paste it down below to print out the body of the note. I'm going to replace title with uppercase B body, and I'm going to reference the body attribute on the note object. Excellent. Now with this in place, we should be able to run our app and see both of these notes printing. I'm going to go ahead and rerun it. This is going to try to create a note with toBy, which already exists, so we should get an error message. And right here, you can see note title taken. Now we can rerun the command, changing the title to something else, like toBy from store. This is a unique note title, so the note should get created without any problems. And right here, you can see we get just that. We have our note created message, we have our little spacer, and we have our title along with the body. This is fantastic. The add note command is now complete. We have an output when the command actually finishes, and we have all the code that runs behind the scenes to add the note to the data that gets stored in our file. Now this code right here is going to get simplified a little later. For the moment, we're going to leave it like it is though. That is it for this one. In this video, we pulled out a lot of the code from add note into separate functions, fetch notes and save notes, which are now separate and they're able to be reused throughout the code. So down below, when we start filling out the other methods, we can simply call fetch notes and save notes instead of having to copy the contents over and over again to every new method. We also, inside of app.js, added a little bit of output after the command runs. We print a nice message if the note gets added successfully, and if things go wrong, we just tell them the note title is already taken so they can adjust the command they ran. That is it for this one. I will see you next time as we start adding support for all the other commands inside of the Notes application.